Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today I'm talking about The Calf. This episode was directed by Harry Harris, possibly his first episode directing the Waltons, and he became a favorite of ours and the producers, and over the years directed many episodes. As I take a look at some of these very early episodes from the series, I see the way in which we are finding our way into the patterns and rhythms and things that will become synonymous with the series, character aspects, and just finding our rhythm. So something stood out for me very early in this episode where I call Olivia Mother instead of Mama. Mama became the way Mama, Daddy, that was how we referred to our parents throughout the series. But in this particular case, I call her Mother. This episode revolves around Chance and her new calf. Chance has had a calf, and the family gets very attached to this new calf. Unfortunately, it is a bull rather than a heifer, and therefore it is not of practical use initially to the Waltons. John has had an axle break on his truck. He needs to replace that. Money is tight. Early on, you see him, John and Olivia, going over the household bills. Things are tight. We are still in the Depression. So when his axle breaks, he sees no way around keeping this calf and needs to sell it to have the money in order to pay to replace his axle. This creates tremendous conflict within the family. All of the kids are very disappointed and upset because to them this calf is already a family pet. And Chance is very heartbroken and continues to moan and cry out continually, just adding to the reminder all the time about this poor calf. Chance has disappeared. She's gone off into the woods, the pasture, the meadows, whatever, to have her calf. And John and John Boy go out searching, can't find her. And then Grandpa goes out searching and finds her. And there are a number of times in this episode where people are carrying this calf around. In this case, Will gets to pick that calf up and carry it. I can't imagine it was all that light. Later on, you see John carrying the calf. You see the farmer that they sell it to has it at one point. So this calf didn't seem to mind being carried around. And I also love how clearly the cow who was, playing Chance was comfortable with this calf, which made me wonder whether they did get a cow that had a calf or whether it is instinctive for many cows to nurture a young calf and whether it was that sort of bond. So I'm not sure if they had a calf and it was taken from its own mother and our cow took it under its wing, or what exactly the deal was. I'm also not sure how they get a calf to moan and cry out all the time. I don't know, the mysteries of cow wrangling. In this case, we see Ralph, John, enter over this little ridge next to where the garden is by the shed. I don't recall ever using that as an entrance into the yard before. So a case of a director taking a look at the space and deciding that's where they were going to make the entrance. Typically, we saw people enter more through the roads coming into the dirt paths coming into the front yard, or sometimes the path over but behind the sawmill area past the chicken coop. When I first saw this sequence, because you can see that large field behind where they're walking, I went, oh, that looks like Fraser Park, where we would sometimes go for location shooting. We would not go up to Fraser Park just to shoot one scene. So if they were going to go up there for a day, they would go up there for the day. So they would find a way to make use of various locations up there to give themselves a full day of filming. So in this case, as I continued to watch the episode, I noted other places where I went, oh, that was Fraser Park. that was Fraser Park, as opposed to things that were on the back lot. So when Jim Bob and Elizabeth are trying to hide Bullet, the calf, they are running through woods, and you see again traces of things that I recognized from shooting in Fraser Park, when at times when they are searching for Jim Bob and Elizabeth, we see that where the farmer's house was and that field, that would have been Fraser Park. So they laid it out to make use of a full day of filming, which would have been part of all of the budgeting and scheduling that would have gone on for the filming of this episode. I loved seeing Elizabeth hugging the cow, and it took me back to the homecoming. There are references in some of these earlier episodes that sort of pay tribute and harken back to the homecoming. In this case, I thought back to my character, Mary Ellen, in the barn, and when she's all upset and stuff, and then she comes back over and says, "I always feel better after I hug a cow." And here we have Elizabeth doing the same thing, trying to comfort the cow and herself. The Waltons around the kitchen table. This was something that was established in the homecoming, when you see us having a meal around the kitchen table, and was the heart of the show so much of the time during the series. What I noted here was, typically we've talked about ad libs, and usually if there was a general sort of hubbub around the table, we would just say, we would chatter and stuff like that until it was evident that the actual dialogue that was scripted started, and then we would be quiet and the actual scene would happen. But often it was started with, okay, just, everyone's ad-libbing, and the director would have us do that, and then at some point someone would override that with the dialogue from the scene. But what I notice here is that there's sort of a hubbub under there that doesn't sound like we are currently just talking. So it sounds a little like they took some ad-lib dialogue and then sort of layered it in there, but it doesn't seem to match up with what's really happening. And I felt that all of that sort of thing was finessed better as the series went on, and more of it was just recorded naturally and worked out in that way. Here in the parents' bedroom, this is not an angle that we saw a lot, where in a way we see that fourth wall in the bedroom, that wall not where the window is, but the other wall there to the left, where you see it behind Olivia. That wall was typically the one that was out so that the camera could be on that angle. So that was usually the way in which the room was shot. So in this case, they have put that wall back in so that the camera can come around and they can do this over-the-shoulder shot onto Olivia. I've also talked a bit about the use of live fire, whether it's in the stove when they would create that, or in this case, the fireplace, where they would actually light the fireplace for real. And those were, gas and things that they would bring in to allow for that fireplace to be actually lit. And then it would be vented all the way up through the top of the soundstage. Often in the series, when you saw Will wearing his overalls, which was kind of the thing that he typically wore, he would often have one suspender unhooked. In this episode, it kind of comes and goes, but it became a bit of Grandpa's trademark that he would often have one suspender unhooked. I'm not sure why Will chose to do that. It was just something that he, I guess, wanted for the character and felt was part of who Grandpa was. And right from the beginning of the series, one of the most beautiful things was the relationships. Particularly, I always loved Olivia and John as parents. In this case, Jim Bob and Elizabeth have run off. They have worried the family. They have basically stolen this calf that doesn't belong to them. And John has a parenting moment, a lovely parenting moment, giving them some realities about life, and yet doing it so that they will understand the importance of this, and yet he's not overly harsh with them. Just one of the numerous occasions of beautiful writing and a beautiful execution of the scene by Ralph. That's what I have for you for this episode of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, about the episode from season 1, The Calf. If you're enjoying these, please do like and subscribe. I'll be back with more Behind the Scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.